to one of the tribes. And that tribe is Menashe. The tribe of Menashe basically gets the short end of the stick, so to speak, because we have two tribes that decide they do not want to cross the Jordan River. They don't want to go into Israel. They want to settle in Jordan, right? This is a well-known documented story in the Torah where two of the tribes, it was Gad and Reuven, I believe. Actually, let's just go straight through it. I don't know why. Let's just get it right in the text. So here's how it starts. They approach Moshe. The land that Hashem struck down before the nation of Israel is a land for livestock. In other words, the land of Sichon and Og, which was across basically where Jordan is. And your servants have livestock. Miknei Rav, we have lots of sheep, lots of goats, lots of animals. And they said, if we have found favor in your eyes, may this land be given to your servants as an inheritance. Do not lead us across the Jordan River. So they basically fell in love with the land that is now known as Jordan, and they did not want to cross the Jordan River into the land of Israel. That's the text. Which tribes were these? It was the tribe of, I believe, Gad and Reuven. Yes, the tribe of Gad and Reuven. They asked Moshe not for permission to stay in Jordan. Now, is this a good thing or is this a bad thing? They basically don't want to enter the land of Israel. Okay? They're asking permission. They're asking nicely. They're not trying to rebel against God. They're not trying to rebel against Moshe. They're just asking a very fair question. So what is the response? So Moshe basically tells them, Moshe consults with Hashem, and Moshe gets upset at first, but then, at least the way the commentaries paint the picture, but then Moshe says, as long as you join the people in conquering the land, and you don't abandon, in other words, you're not going to separate from the rest of the community, you're going to join the people in conquering the land, then you could come back to Jordan and settle here. That was the story. But Moshe did something that was pretty puzzling. He basically included or forced half of the tribe of Menashe to join them. That it wasn't just Reuven and Gad, but it wasn't just those two tribes, but half the tribe of Menashe was forced to join them on the other side of the Jordan. All right? So the Medrash gives us the basics here. You find that the descendants of Gad and Reuven were wealthy and had abundance of livestock. They loved their affluence and settled outside the land of Israel. This is why they were exiled before the other tribes, that it is written, and he the king of Assyria. In other words, this is the story of the 10 tribes. I guess it's represented by Reuven, Gad, and half of Menashe, even though it was more than them. It was all 10 tribes except for Binyamin, Yehuda, and a half of the tribe of Levi. What provoked their early exile is because they separated from their brothers over their possessions. How do we know this? For the Torah states, and the descendants of Reuven and Gad had an abundance of livestock. Okay, so just quickly, this isn't really the point of the class, but if you go back to the text, they said, actually, I don't know if we have the full text here. We don't. Let's see if we have it back over here in 2b. No. So basically, we don't have the text here, and I apologize. But in the text, they said, the Reuben and Gad said, we have many livestock, and we want this place for our livestock and place to build cities for our children. So they basically put their livestock before their children. So it wasn't that they settled outside the land, that they wanted to settle outside the land of Israel. It's that they valued the land for their livestock more than they valued their children. And that's why Moshe was upset at first, which made it a very difficult moment. I'm mentioning that because it's important, because initially it started out as a negative, but as you're going to see, Moshe turned the moment around into a very big positive, which is how the class is being framed and how we're going to make this a practical lesson for us. But the real question here is that in the text, if you'll notice in the text, if you read it straight from the Torah, there's no mention at all in the request of Menashe. Now, who is Menashe? Menashe is one of the sons of Yosef, and as we know, both of Yosef's sons, Ephraim and Menashe, were both considered two individual tribes that basically they were elevated by Yaakov to be considered Yaakov's own sons. So therefore, Ephraim and Menashe each were basically their own tribe. So half the tribe of Menashe was basically assigned to be also living across the Jordan River with the tribe of Gad and Reuven. And that's the biggest puzzling question. Why did Moshe decide that? Where did this come from? Why did Menashe deserve that? The biggest puzzling part of this is I want to skip to a text that says that Menashe loved the land of Israel, was so excited about the land of Israel more than any other tribe. Where's this text? Give me 1 second. Here, this is the text. This is from the Medrash. What does the Medrash say? That 1 spoon weighing 10 silver shekels, this represented the 10 districts that fell to the tribe of Menashe. That basically the Menashe valued that its 10 districts of the land of Israel. And then the Medrash goes on. 1 young bull, 1 ram, 1 buck. These 3 offerings represented the 3 generations of Menashe's descendants that Yosef lived to see, who received portions of the land of Israel. 2 oxen for the peace offering. This indicated that the portion of Menashe was divided into 2 halves, half for the tribe that was on the far bank of the Jordan River, and half for the tribe that received the portion in the land. 5 rams, 5 bucks, 5 lambs. These are all sacrifices. Why 5 of each? These represented the 5 daughters who received a portion of the land, and these are the 5 daughters of Slavchat for whom there were 5. In other words, Menashe, the tribe of the Medrash is trying to say here that the tribe of Menashe loved the land of Israel so much. I'm skipping to this text because I want to make that point. If they loved the land of Israel so much, why was Moshe punishing them by telling them that half of them would have to live with Gad and Reuven across the Jordan River? If they were the most excited about going to, imagine like you're on a trip and, right before you get there, you take the kids who are most excited and you say, hey, half of you or a few of you are going to have to stay behind in the car or something like it. Why does half of Menashe have to be punished to live across the Jordan? So, and that's the key here that we're going to examine for this class. I'm going to skip this. This is why Moshe was upset, is because in the verse they said that we have many livestock before they said anything about their children, and Moshe was upset that they were focusing on their materialistic needs before their spiritual needs. There was nothing wrong with the request for wanting to settle there, per se. It was more that the focus of their request was coming from as Moshe, their teacher, Moshe, their mentor, Moshe, their leader, was disappointed that their focus was on their materialistic needs versus the important needs of their families and their children. Now, let's read this Rashi, but we're going to, this is why Moshe was upset. An inheritance acquired hastily in the beginning because one hastens to take it first. What does that mean? This is a verse from Shlomo HaMelech in Proverbs. So the Rashi says the descendants of Gad and Reuven are a good example. They hastened to take their share on the far banks of the Jordan River, and they spoke hastily. This indicated that the following passage, we will build sheepfolds for our cattle here in the cities for our children. So they mentioned their cattle before their children. Are providing for their livestock before their children. They prioritize what should have been secondary. There's nothing wrong with livestock. You need to have livestock. Livestock and cattle are a very good thing. They're very important. They're part of the agriculture. It's very important. But if you're making that the priority and your children secondary, then you're creating an imbalance that is not the right foundation to build a society upon, which is what led Moshe to be a little bit upset. So now you have Moshe, who's about to die and about to leave his sheep, his flock, his children, his nation, entering the land of Israel. And here are 2 very distinguished tribes asking to not enter the land of Israel and are making a very poor request, not the request itself, but are making a request where they're focused on materialistic needs and they're focused on, nothing wrong with focusing on the materialistic needs. That's the whole purpose of living life in the world. But they're prioritizing their materialistic needs over the education and the value of their children. So what does Moshe do? And this is a lesson in leadership. It's a lesson in personal growth and development. And it's a lesson in our journey as a nation of the Jewish people, but it's also relevant to every society and every nation as a whole, or a community as a whole. Moshe has a plan. So this land that they're talking about is what we know now as the country of Jordan, right? What was the land before that? So this is from Moshe gave the descendants of Gad and descendants of Reuven, half of the tribe of Menashe, son of Yosef, the kingdom of the Amorite, king of Sichon, and the kingdom of Og. And he gave them the land together with its cities within the borders, the cities of the surrounding territory. So Moshe agreed to give them this land outside of the land of Israel, as long as they joined their brothers to conquer the land of Canaan first, and then they would be able to come back. I'm going to skip this text. Okay? What is with the tribe of Menashe? Moshe is upset, and Moshe makes a condition: go conquer the land of Israel. Don't let them fight themselves. And as long as you selflessly join with your brothers, then you've shown that you're not selfish. And once you do that, come back and have your livestock, have your cities, have your place in the land of Jordan, which is fine. Why did half of the tribe of Menashe also have to be added to the land of Jordan? So this was Moshe's brilliant plan. You know, if you own a business, and I'm bringing this up because this is a very relevant situation that I'm dealing with right now, and you have a very distinct culture that you really like in your business. Now, culture is very connected to atmosphere, right? The atmosphere of the people in your business, or when I say business, I don't mean like it could be an organization, it could be wherever the place of work is. It radiates energy, physical energy in the place that you are. The people that are behaving, talking, connecting, the way they speak to each other, the way they speak to customers, the way they speak to other individuals, that all is a part of the culture. The way they treat each other, the way they learn how the work ethic, everything else, everything is all connected. What happens when your business grows and you have to have a second location? Which means your culture now has to travel and maintain its unique ability and unique identity and its unique and its unique flavor, and protect and be protected. I'm looking for a specific word, but you know what I mean, in both locations. Because you don't want to leave the culture up to whichever individuals happen to be in each location. You want to ensure that the culture you built, or the culture you're trying to empower, is alive and well intentionally in both locations equally. And it's a lot easier to do this in one location. So what do you do when you need to have two locations? What do you do? I don't know the answer. If you own a business and you're watching this and you are trying to give business advice, don't listen to this as the answer. But from the Torah class point of view, I'm going to give you a suggestion of what I think the answer could be, and use that as the point of our class. One good idea is you identify the people that are most in line with your culture, the people that are the best culture, that exude the energy of the culture you want to build. And you make sure that those people are properly placed in both places, that are leading and empowering in both places equally, or crossing over to bring the culture equally in both locations. Obviously, you can't limit that to a few people. You have to have enough people that are hired for the culture 100%. But the point is that it's the people that make the culture, and those people have to be equally in both places. And as long as that's happening, and you're not having one group or one clique in one place and another clique in another place, and there's two separate entities, as long as there's a lot of crossover of the same culture, then you could probably equally distribute the positive culture you're trying to build in both locations. Okay. Why did I say that? Because this is what Moshe Rabbeinu was trying to do with Menashe. Menashe, because they loved the land of Israel so much, Moshe knew that Menashe would not stay away from the land of Israel. And by putting half of the tribe of Menashe across the Jordan, he knew that they would naturally unite that piece of land with the land of Israel, because there would be so much crossover that the people that are living in Israel would want to see their family on the other side, and the people living on the other side would have such a love for the land of Israel, they would be coming to Israel. So there'd be so much crossover that they would constantly bring Israel to Jordan. I'm calling it Jordan just for the simplicity of the conversation. And the people in Jordan would bring themselves and bring what they're doing, which is also important, to the land of Israel, and it would become one. It would unite it. So that's why they didn't put the whole Menashe there, because you need to have half the Menashe to be settled and rooted in the roots of the land of Israel. But the other half of Menashe, because half of them are rooted in the land of Israel, will be strong enough to bring that love of the land of Israel to the land across the Jordan. There's something else that's very interesting, and we don't have a text here for it. But the other thing that's interesting, I'm going to this text here. The other thing that's interesting is that the word Menashe got his name. The word Menashe means Yosef was saying, Nashani Elokim Me'aretz Avi. I forgot the words of the verse, but basically Yosef was saying he wanted to remain connected to his father's house. That Yosef was in Egypt, he was in a foreign land, and this Menashe was his first child, and he named his child as a way to remember and to connect to his father's house, to his roots. So Menashe was the connector of Yosef, who was living outside the land of Israel, who was living away, torn away from his father, even though he was the viceroy of Egypt. But he was still lonely. He was in the land of Israel, living in a foreign land of Egypt, living in a foreign land. He wanted to strengthen that connection that he had to his father in the land of Canaan, in the land of Israel. So Menashe essentially represents the essence of remaining connected to our roots. So Moshe Rabbeinu took half the tribe of Menashe to make sure that the two tribes of Reuven and Gad would not become isolated and disconnected and disassociated from the rest of Israel, from the rest of the tribes, and they would become united in one with the land of Israel. So the Rebbe uses this story in the Torah as a fundamental principle of Judaism, as well as a prediction for the future. So first of all, the Rebbe says everything Moshe did wasn't just like a one-time thing, but Moshe was building a foundation that was meant to be for all generations. So in other words, Moshe's actions were there to be constantly in effect. So what does this mean for us? So number one, Moshe's establishment of the Holy Land, starting from the bottom. Moshe's establishment of the Holy Land was established under Moshe. In other words, the lots we read in last week's Torah portion was done under Moshe's supervision by God, obviously, giving the drawing the lots to give the land of Canaan to each tribe. The prediction of the coming of Mashiach, as it says, Moshe was the first redeemer, and Moshe will be the final redeemer. And what does that mean? Because we know that the final redeemer will be a descendant of King David, and Moshe precedes King David. He's also a descendant of the tribe of Levi. So what it means is that Moshe is the spirit of Moshe, the soul of Moshe is going to be the redeemer. And also, as we're going to see in a minute, Moshe initiated the redemption by this move of Menashe, which we're going to talk about. But also, everything in the Torah, every single commentary in the Torah, not just the 5 books of Moses, but everything that was written afterwards was all given to Moshe at Mount Sinai. So everything that happened to us was all already established through Moshe. Moshe, like, it wasn't just the 40 years that he led us in the desert, but everything happened through Moshe. And this is an example of this. The written Torah, the Mishnah, the laws, the Talmud, the additional teachings, and the Aggadah teachings, including anything a veteran student might ever say before their teacher, were all transmitted to Moshe at Mount Sinai. And this is stated in the passage. There are things about which one might say, in other words, future tense. See, this is new. Yet one's colleagues would reply it already existed because it was all given to Moshe at Mount Sinai. As we know from the story that I've said many times in a class here, that Moshe saw Hashem writing the crowns on the letters in the Torah, and Moshe asked, what are those for? And Hashem said that there's going to be a man, Rabbi Akiva, who's going to learn many laws from these crowns, and Hashem gave him a preview of what those laws are going to be. But the point is, everything was transmitted to Moshe. Whether it's Kabbalah, whether it's Medrash, whether it's everything was transmitted to Moshe. It was revealed later, but the core of it, the essence of it, the spiritual source of it, everything was given to Moshe on Mount Sinai. Now, by the way, that's what gives it legitimacy. In other words, when we study commentary on the Torah, when you study, let's say, the Nachmanides, or when you study like Nachmanides commentary on the Torah, you study Rashi, or you study even a talk from the Rebbe, we believe that all this was given to Moshe at Mount Sinai, and it was only revealed through our sages throughout Jewish history, but the initial source of it was given to Moshe at Mount Sinai. This is something that's a core Jewish belief. Now, we also believe that Moshe was our first and he will be the final Redeemer. Now, what does this mean for us? And by the way, the word Moshe is the 3 letters, and Mem Shin Hey is an acronym, Mashahaya Huyiya. In other words, that the same redemption, the same person that did the redemption is going to be the one that will redeem us. So what we see here, what the Rebbe is going to say now, is that what we see here in Moshe's actions in planting or allowing Reuven and Gad to live on the side of the Jordan is an actual seed that Moshe was planting for the final redemption. And by placing half of the tribe of Menashe with them let's call that the soil, or the fertilizer is not really a good term, but I guess it really is, because forget what fertilizer is made of. Fertilizer is what makes the soil what makes the seeds grow. But Menashe was the cultivator, let's say, that the seed should actually yield its results, yield its fruit. So one very basic principle is that basically from the time we left Egypt all the way to the final redemption is all considered to be one long journey. What I want to get to is like this. And I'll leave it on this screen, even though we have a lot more text, but I want to first get to our main point. When Mashiach comes, one of the core messages in the Torah, the Rambam illustrates or enumerates where the Torah tells us about the final redemption. So the first place is by Bilam, when Bilam prophesizes about the end of days and what's going to happen. So that's the first place where we have the real visual of the final redemption. But one of the core prophecies is from Moshe. Before we get to the prophecies of Isaiah and everything in the books of prophets, in the Torah itself, in the 5 books of Moses itself, where Moshe says we're going to build the 6 cities of refuge. 3 of them are going to be on the Israel side of the Jordan, and 3 of them are going to be on the other side of the Jordan, which is now Jordan, let's say. And those Moshe never built. And the Rambam points out that was meant, Moshe was saying this is going to be in the future, that when Mashiach comes, that's when those cities are going to be built. So, in other words, the idea of the cities of refuge was Moshe's prediction of the final redemption, which means that, and not trying to complicate it with the cities of refuge, because let's not get lost in that for a second. But the final redemption does include, and this was the triggering part for those who are triggered by the whole greater Israel thing, although we do not believe it is something that we do as far as the greater. We believe that when Mashiach comes, it's a godly act, that God does this in the final redemption. But we believe that the final redemption does include the land across the Jordan River, where the other three cities of refuge will be. That's something that we believe in Jewish belief. It's not something we believe that we do physically, that we conquer ourselves, that we do. We do believe that it's something that, just like the third temple, we don't build it, God builds it. I'm just sharing that for I guess, the politically correct crowd. It's not something that we take into our own hands, but it is part of a Jewish belief that in the final redemption, God will build a third temple and God will expand the borders of the land of Israel, based on the days of King David, when it was the way it was conquered under the days of King David. Now, having said that, biblically, the land on the other side of the Jordan is part of the future land of Israel, but only in the time of the redemption, not during the initial phase. In other words, during those first years, Gad and Reuven technically lived outside of Israel. It wasn't until the days of King David that that part became Israel. So technically, Gad and Reuven were asking to live outside of the land of Israel. They wanted to live on the side in the Jordan side of the Jordan River. Now, Moshe knew that in the future redemption, first under King David, but then eventually in the future redemption, this is going to be part of Israel. But Moshe also knew that now is not the time. In other words, we're not there yet. We're not at the final redemption yet. So Moshe did is he turned this negative request, which was focused on materialism, focused on putting your cattle before your children, which upset Moshe initially, and he turned that into planting seeds for the future redemption. Moshe decided, I'm not going to let this become a negative request or a negative complaint to the Jewish people that is a black eye on the Jewish people. This is actually going to be the beginning of the final redemption. And that's why he imposed on half of the tribe of Menashe to join them, to make sure this isn't just agreeing to the request, but this is actually being proactive to make sure that the settling of the land of Jordan, on that side of the Jordan, is planting those seeds for the future redemption. We're going to read a bunch of texts now that will lead us to this point, but I wanted to make that point first. The land of Israel is beloved. It is beloved for God selected it. We find that when God created the world, he divided the lands amongst all of the chieftains, the nations, and chose Israel for himself. How do we know this? Because Moshe said, when God gave the nations their lot, in other words, every nation of the world, every nation has an angel, and God gave them their land. And God selected the Jewish people for himself, as it is stated, because Jacob is God's portion, and Jacob is the lot of his inheritance. So what God says is, let the Jewish people who came to be my portion inherit the land that I selected as my portion. That's the Medrash. Now, Moshe's gaze imbued the land with sanctity. The Talmud states that our enemies never destroyed what Moshe and King David created, thus the sanctity of the Holy Land is eternal. So what Moshe saw as an opportunity, even though he knew that the role at the time was only for the land across the Jordan, Moshe saw an opportunity to start the redemption of the land of Jordan and start to make it holy. Even though the holiness would still be concealed until the days of King David. And even then, under King David, it wasn't permanent, it was temporary until Mashiach comes. But he figured, why not start the process? So the designation of the Holy Land for the Jewish people, also fundamental to Judaism, came through Moshe gazing over the land from Mount Nevo before his passing. And that's what allowed it to become what gave it the potential for us to make it holy. Now, interestingly, and we had a class about this, the land of Israel only had its holiness once the Jewish people crossed the Jordan. And then when they were expelled after the first temple destruction, it lost its holiness. Only once they came back after their exile in Babylon, did it regain its holiness for good. That holiness could never be taken away. And that's for the land of Israel across the Jordan, meaning not the land of Jordan, because they had to come at their own free will from an exile on their own free will with Ezra, and then we had a whole class about that. But Moshe planted the seeds, or at least gave it the potential to become holy through the Jewish people going there. And by Gad and Reuven's request, it allowed Moshe to do the same thing to extend the holiness across the Jordan River, which would only happen under King David and eventually for permanent under the rule of Mashiach. So this is why Moshe assigned half of Menashe's tribe a portion on the far bank of the Jordan River. Settling Jews on the other side of the Jordan River foreshadowed the future when Hashem will expand your boundaries, because it constituted an expansion of Israel's boundaries, which we know won't happen until Mashiach comes. But Moshe figured, why not? You know what? They're coming at it from a materialistic point of view, at least the tribes of Reuven and Gad are, but let's capitalize on this and utilize this opportunity to usher in the final redemption. So while Gad and Reuven may have been focused on the material side, Menashe was able to bring about the holiness, or at least help implant the holiness to spill over Israel into the land of across the Jordan River. And that's what Moshe's intention was. And Menashe was happy to comply because Menashe understood Moshe's intention. Menashe understood what Moshe's trying to build here and what the ultimate destination is, which is the final redemption. So forgetting the coming and going, because that is the way the way the person who put the PowerPoint together wanted to frame the class, that you're not just coming to Israel, you're also going, because you're taking Israel, you're taking the spirit of Israel outside as well. But the point is that the point that I want to focus on, the one point that I want to focus on, is the ability to transform a negative situation into a positive. And we'll do that this is the text we already read, so I'm going to skip that. But the reason why Moshe made sure the tribe of Menashe was part of this plan, to join half of them at least. He didn't want to put all of them there because he wanted half of them to be in Israel because they love the land of Israel, and he knew they would connect with each other. So they would bring Israel to Jordan, and they would transfer, and they would connect them both and make it all one. They would create a highway, and they would create a constant flow back and forth. So after this text, I'm going to explain what the one point that I really want to zero in on instead of the coming and going. Moshe made a point to assign half of the tribe of Menashe to Transjordan and half to the land of Canaan. This underscored that Menashe did not go to Transjordan to surrender their portion in the land of Israel, God forbid. They certainly had a portion in the land of Israel. However, it is like the inheritance of Israel that we receive when Mashiach comes. The Jewish people will then be divided into two groups. One group will be in what is considered the land of Israel today, and the other will be in what is regarded the land of Israel when Mashiach comes, because the land of Israel is going to expand. So some of us will be in the origin land of Israel. Some of us will be in the land of Israel, which is made holy. And by the way, it's not less holy. In fact, some will say it's even greater because it's the transformation of holiness, transformation of mundane into holiness. One more text. This was the fundamental difference between the descendants of Gad and Reuven versus the descendants of Menashe. The descendants of Gad and Reuven received their inheritance in Transjordan because A, they asked for it, B, they cherished their possessions, their cattle, and C, they prepared to surrender their portion in the God-given land to achieve their aim of having a place for their cattle. Not so with the descendants of Menashe, for whom it occurred in the very opposite way. A, Moshe assigned them their portion in Transjordan. B, by accepting, they allowed the initial Jewish inheritance of Israel to foreshadow the Israel we will inherit when Mashiach comes. The thread that I want to focus on, because here is Gad and Reuven goers, they're going outside of Israel. Menashe is basically coming and going, really, not just comers. But the thread I want to focus on is a little bit different than the way the PowerPoint is set up. Here you have Moshe, who is a leader, who's invested literally his entire life in his people. And he's been through a rough ride of turbulence just from the face value. I know there's deep meaning in everything that happened and he experienced, from Korach's rebellion to the spies, to the meat complainers, to the water complainers, to the snake, to everything that he went through. And he's invested and he's worked so hard to teach, and it's all he's been doing is teaching them. And now he's about to enter the land of Israel, and they can see it. They're at the Jordan River. They're literally, and Moshe's about to die. So his one final act of fulfilling the promise that is supposed to happen, Moshe's not actually able to finish the job. And as a human, put ourselves in his shoes for a second. So, and now two tribes, which is a big percentage, a considerable percentage, and the wealthiest tribes approach him and say, "We don't want to go. We want to just a place for our cattle. This is good enough for us. Here you're building up this destination, and you're building up the value of children and of raising a family values, and passing it on to the children, and building up a community and everything else that we value in the Jewish community, not just the Jewish community, but something we definitely, and many other communities value this as well. But we pride ourselves on these things, and definitely what Moshe was trying to teach. And all of a sudden, you have these two tribes that have everything upside down. The cattle come first before the children. They don't want to cross the Jordan River. They want to just live in this land that they just wandered 40 years in. Everything's messed up. Moshe would be completely decimated or broken. He's about to die, and this last step is falling up. Everything's falling apart. Seriously, guys? We worked so hard for this. You want to stay here? And what does Moshe do? He turns it around to Mashiach. He says, actually, you guys are going to be the seeds of the coming of the final redemption of the Jewish people. Your materialistic views, or your material needs, or your lack of interest in the land of Israel is actually going to be the foundation of the final and so badly needed, absolutely necessary final redemption of the coming of Mashiach. You'll need some help, which is why we're going to get the Menashe boys over here to come help you. But technically, you're going to be the foundation of that. That is the power of Moshe Rabbeinu, to turn one of the most difficult moments of probably his life. This is the end of his life. I can only imagine, like, someone who's raised children and grandchildren, to see like someone who, one of their grandchildren go in the wrong direction, how much direction they're not happy about it, how difficult it could be. And that's pretty much what Moshe's watching here. And here he turns it around and says, you guys are actually going to be the foundation of the coming of Mashiach. This is, and when you learn the Sikha, the way that Rebbe lays it out here, it's just so powerful how differently you see Moshe Rabbeinu and how differently you see the opportunity here. When we're faced with whether you as an individual, you as a family, as a parent, as a grandparent, as a teacher, as a leader, as whatever situation you're in, when you're faced with this kind of challenge, and I'm not going to give examples because everyone can you can always find the example in your mind. When you're faced with a challenge where Gad and Reuven are saying, hey, we don't want to do this. We don't want to go into the land of Israel. You're handing them the greatest gift of all, and they don't want it. And they have their priorities all upside down. Think like Moshe. Remember that you're always have the opportunity to plant the seeds of the coming of Mashiach. And if you just turn the situation around, you might have to add the flavor of Menashe. You may have to get some help. But with the right ingredients, you could plant the best outcome, which is the coming of Mashiach. And that's exactly what Moshe did. And because of that, we are promised the expansion. It's because of that we're promised the expansion of the land of Israel, which is the core of the coming of Mashiach, because the whole idea of Mashiach is perfecting the whole world, elevating the whole world to holiness, revealing godliness in the whole world, which is exactly what began with Reuven and Gad settling in the land of Jordan. So let's read this final text here. The Rebbe Rab Shalom Dever of the fifth Rebbe of Lubavitch. This is coming from the previous Rebbe. My master, father, mentor, and teacher told someone during a personal audience. Ever since God told our father Avram, go from your land, and it is written Avram kept traveling southward, the mystery of sanctifying the world began. By decree of divine providence, we each go about our travels to the place where our personal mission awaits us. Righteous people who have spiritual vision see where their mission awaits them and go there deliberately, like the Baal Shem Tov and his Mitzvah Shabbos adventures. But as for the ordinary folk, the cause of all Hashem, the cause of all causes, and prime mover brings about various reasons and circumstances that propel us to the place that we were assigned the mission to perform. So wherever we are, whatever situation we end up in, we have to know, just like Moshe realized that Gad and Reuven were there divinely for the coming of Mashiach, and Moshe was able to arrange that, even though it was coming necessarily from the wrong place. Moshe was able to make sure and to turn it around and to see it as a positive opportunity. And that's how we have to see everything, wherever we end up, whatever we do, whatever situation we're in, we turn it around into a positive and realize that we could not just not see it as a negative, but see it as a transformation of elevating the situation into a Mashiach moment. So we can turn even non-ideal choices into growth, holiness by transforming ourselves into comers. I don't know what he means by comers, but basically coming to the land of Israel, I guess, but like into realizing that this could also be a Mashiach moment. What is Mashiach moment? What is Mashiach? Mashiach means anointed. What does it mean to anoint? What happened when one of the Kohanim was anointed with the oil? It means that they were elevated. They were elevated spiritually. When Mashiach comes, the world will be elevated to a spiritual level that will be able to perceive the godliness in the world. We'll be able to perceive how God is everything. The whole world will be able to perceive how God is everything. So when we're faced with a difficult situation or something bad happens or so, whatever, if you see the source of it, if we're able to see the essence of it, then we could perceive the godliness within it and be able to appreciate it. And that's what's called the Mashiach moment, because the more we do that, we're able to usher in the final redemption. This is the message of Moshe Rabbeinu, is dealing with this difficult situation and turning it around. And one final piece is that we should always try to be like a Menashe and always be like the ones that to be helpful for part of that solution, and to be the ones to be influencers versus being influenced. Influencers in a positive way, and not social media influencers per se. Although if it's positive stuff, by all means. But point is that we have to always look for those opportunities and never let a negative situation or a negative occurrence or a negative comment or a negative someone posing a negative challenge to us be a reason why we are deterred or why we're upset. We always have the opportunity to turn it around.